Yes. Looks like we have more than usual, Trey. Yes, I think painfully awkward was a word that you used, Emma.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Well, once again, welcome everyone to Eternally Bored, the podcast where we're eternally bored so you don't have to be. I'm Charles Washington, just a general man of the people. And of course, we have, as always,
Trey Chambers. And guest host today, returning, is Ben, who's been here before. And we have a new face, Emma, his fiancee.
No. She's her own person, too. Evil gamer incarnate.
No, but we've referred to her on the podcast before, so that's
okay.
Fine.
All right.
Anyway, so we're here today talking about disposable games or one-play games, which includes escape room style games and includes as well legacy games, most legacy games. Anyway, so before I get to that though, I want to shout out to all of our subscribers. We've hit 100 subscribers, our first milestone.
Yay!
Which is really great because only like 2 episodes ago we had like 50 subscribers. So something happened, I don't know, word of mouth, and the growth has been exponential, which is great. So keep telling your friends if you enjoy the podcast. I know there's a lot of board game podcasts out there, almost as many as there are board gamers, but we thank you for choosing us.
I'd just like to cut in and say you're welcome for the great contribution I did to that.
Yeah.
We do appreciate.
No problem.
Cool. So let's jump into the topic of one-play games. So first, just a general question to our panel is, how have your experiences with one-play games been? We'll start with Charles and go down.
My experience with one-play games has been hit and miss, definitely. Probably.
You mean like cannon hit and miss?
Cannon hit and miss, yes.
Like a cannon on a ship in the sea?
So it started out bad because it was Risk. It got better, much better, probably the best experience I've had. And then it went back to off the edge again.
Okay, so mixed. Emma?
I think I've had overall mostly positive experiences. A couple hiccups along the way, maybe, but
if I remember correctly, y'all just tried Pandemic Legacy this morning.
Yes,
That's
we
right.
just came from playing month 1, the
January,
yeah.
Okay, how did y'all like the experience?
I mean, it's pandemic. No.
So
I
far,
like pandemic, yeah.
Yeah.
See, I
Spoken
actually
like a true month 1 player.
No, I'm excited to see all the other stuff that keeps carrying through.
yeah, it does get better and better as the campaign goes.
Yeah.
Ben?
And we were sort of talking just to build a little on that about how stressful it is. So like, you put these stickers on the board, and you're like, oh my god, now this is going to be in future games. This city is less safe than it used to be.
We had like 4 or 5 outbreaks, I think, in the first month.
3 outbreaks. Yeah.
Only 3?
My
Yeah.
goodness.
I think it was like 4 or 5.
I mean, it seemed really like a lot because it was stressful. But it was actually only 3.
We had none in our first game. Maybe you should have played some Pandemic beforehand.
Yeah.
To pull it out.
Sometimes the cards come out, but we can talk more about that later. So I've played a lot of. We've played a fair number of one-play games. We've played the exit games at Trey's house, as well as the Escape the Room game, Dr. Gravelly's Retreat, and almost all the Time Stories ones. Everyone except for the Marcy case.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Time Stories.
It's one of the best ones.
And we started
I like
Pandemic
the
Legacy. So I mean, I think they're pretty good. Yeah.
All right, very cool. And my experiences have been good for the most part. There are a couple of games that I'll talk about later that I didn't particularly care for, but for the most part, I love one-play games. I just think they're very interesting. And let's talk about why. So, pros and cons of one-play games. We'll start with pros, and I guess I'll go first. We'll go the other way. For me, what's great about a one-play game is the way that you can craft like a story, like a in-depth story. You're not just playing like a one-off, like, hey, let's sit down for 2 hours and play a game and then pack it up afterwards and someone won. Yeah, it's more than that. It's a deeper, more meaningful experience, I think. So I don't know. That's for me the biggest pro is like especially the legacy games where you can make lasting changes to the board or to cards. And I also like the escape room experiences because they are kind of, you can, I don't know, make the puzzles more interesting because you're only going to see them once. Whereas like other puzzle games that are not one-play games are more generic, right? You have to kind of make them abstract because they have to be able to be shuffled and randomized again. Whereas like the escape room games, you can like hide things, right? Because they're only gonna see it once, so once they find it, it doesn't matter.
In very frustrating places, from what I've heard.
Oh man, yes, we'll talk about that in a minute.
Are we
all right.
allowed to give spoilers?
No spoilers.
No
This will be a
spoilers.
spoiler-free episode. Don't worry.
That changes everything.
Okay, so other pros. What are some other pros that y'all thought of one-play games?
Yeah, I think building on what you were talking about, I think theme is something that is very unique to one-play games because the best ones tend to be very thematically rich.
Mm-hmm.
That the puzzles that you're going through you really feel like it's you're in that whatever the thematic environment, whether it's a lab or you're stuck in some kind of cabin with a crazy person or traveling back in time to the 20s. It really immerses you in what it is because of you going through that adventure.
Yeah, even with something more abstract like Pandemic, I think having it in the legacy format and like having changes being made to the world immerses you in Pandemic more because it's like, oh, the city had an outbreak and now it's like prone to more outbreaks,
Right.
things like that. So I think it even helps in themes like that.
Plus, let's not mention, or do you want to go?
Yeah, that's good. I thought we were going down the line.
We can go down. All right, we'll keep it going.
Tell them.
For me, the probably my biggest pro is puzzles. I like puzzles a lot, and especially with the escape the room style games, you get a lot of interesting and fun puzzles.
Yes. And Charles?
I would say probably the best thing is the arguments. Arguments that last forever, and memories that they can make is, without a doubt, the legacy system of games have made the best memories with those people and with people who were just casually observing as well for those game systems. And, I can say that about all the games, whether they've been good or bad. I've always had a good or bad memory that's very strong.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
And I've enjoyed that.
That is
That's
true.
definitely its biggest pro.
I remember, the exit rooms happened recently, so I definitely remember those, but I remember almost every play of Pandemic that we did. I can't say that about other games. Same thing with Rush Legacy, same thing with Seafall, so it really...
for time stories, too.
Yeah, whereas I can't tell you every time I played Goa or Agricola or whatever, but I can tell you about the times that I played these legacy games or these one-play games. So they definitely stand out.
Yeah, I think as a counterpoint to that, Emma and I were talking about earlier about the first exit room, the lab one.
Mm-hmm.
We were really having a rough time remembering it because the theme is very similar to the Escape the Room game, Secret of Gavrili's Retreat. It's all about labs and mixing chemicals. And we were like, which one came in which one?
Yeah, they blended together.
Yeah, they were sort of too similar to differentiate.
Yeah, that that one, my big fault with that one is that it has a very generic theme. I really enjoyed the theme of the other two, but yeah. So cons of escape of one-play games. Well, they're disposable, so unlike other games where you can play them 1,000 times and have every play be worth cents on the dollar, definitely with one-play games you're probably spending a lot more per play. So that's the most obvious con. What are some other cons you can think of?
Oh.
So many I can think of.
You can get so deeply in before you discover it's poorly designed. And no one can tell you.
What game could you possibly be talking about, Charles?
I don't know.
I had to guess it's a Risk Legacy based on what you said before, but
No.
At least
Lux too.
At least Risk Legacy had the excuse of being A, the first, and B, improving Risk. So it had...
Yeah, you kind of know what you're getting into. When you play Risk Legacy, you're playing Risk.
Yeah, its bar was a little bit lower. And one of the things that's made me very hesitant to jump on any of the, how shall I say it, Kickstarted or games that are legacy oriented that are on Kickstarter right now is because you just don't know. And part of it is a big secret, and that's part of its appeal is the fact that you're going to find these things out. But if something leads you down a rabbit hole, and on one hand it's going to be Wonderland, and the other hand it's literally going to be the bottom of the sewer.
It's like there's a big secret, but sometimes the secret is that you just wasted your money on this game.
But this is also why I did not back first edition on any of these games. I backed Gloomhaven 2nd edition. I backed 7th Continent 2nd edition because hundreds and thousands of people's have played these games now, and they have reviews that you can go read and videos you can watch. And I was convinced, but I wasn't about to drop $150 on an unknown legacy product, especially given the track record that I have of legacy games.
Yeah. And I've actually backed I haven't backed. I played Seventh Continent the other day, and we can talk a bit about that later.
Oh, great.
My experience with that. But.
Yeah. Other cons.
I find, especially in the exit games, that there's a real problem with the puzzles being done by some players while other players don't do them. So, like, that one in particular, the puzzles have to be split up among players, so not everyone's really participating at the same time. So one player might just sit there rotating the wheel while someone else solves the puzzle by themselves.
Yeah, I kind of think the opposite on that it's a good thing that there's enough stuff to go around so everybody's doing something. Not everybody has to have their hands in every single thing that's happening.
And that's more specific to the Exit series, but I do wish they gave you like more puzzles to do at once. Like sometimes we have like 2 or 3 puzzles to do simultaneously, and then we can pass things around and have different people work on different puzzles. But sometimes in the Exit games, you only have one puzzle to solve, and until you get past that bottleneck, and only like one person can solve it. Yeah. That was really our problem with the first one with Secret Lab, is like one person was sitting there doing it for 10 minutes, and it's the only reason why we didn't get a perfect score. But I'm not bitter or anything. So
and one of my things I've seen is like especially in some of the Tom Story series, if choices are sort of obvious, you might just go through the entire game on the first playthrough. And you're done with it. Like, okay, what did I do?
Yeah.
I just finished, we finished Tom Stories in 45 minutes.
And see, we sort of
it feels like you miss out on a lot of the
different scenarios.
Yeah.
And that's actually the biggest problem I have with Time Stories, although it is, I think, one of the best examples of the genre, is the funnest part of the game is exploring all the parts of the game, but that's how you don't get points. You get points by being efficient.
Yeah.
So it makes kind of scorekeeping in that game not really purposeful.
Oh, I thought of a big con. In a lot of these games, mainly with the legacy games, because the other ones are one-shots and you just play them when you're sitting down. But for the legacy games that are campaigns, adding and dropping players is a little, not great. Risk Legacy, okay, but like jumping in the middle of a pandemic campaign, adding players or removing players can be difficult, especially true in Seafall. Like you can't really add or remove players.
It was literally a nightmare when we added a new player.
Yeah, we had a player that demanded to quit, and then we had to get a substitute player, and so we were like begging people because we couldn't really drop them from the campaign. I mean, I guess we could have, but then 3-player Seafall would not have been good. So.
And then the new player who came in fundamentally just broke the game open as well for strategies.
And also hated it.
So
yeah, it was
fun day.
So that's so I think for these legacy games, like I know it's going to be a problem in Gloomhaven. I don't think it's a big problem in Seventh Continent because I think you can just play a different curse with new added players. But with Gloomhaven, I know that you can't really just add and drop players because a big part of that game is getting characters and leveling them and developing them. So
yeah, I think sort of what you're talking about speaks to the idea that if a game's a one-shot, it also has to be a good game, and if it's not a good game, just because you play it once doesn't actually make it good just because you don't have to play it again.
Yeah.
And you were sort of talking about that earlier, Charles.
Exactly.
Yeah. So. And a related drawback, also, you can't really just bring them to public meetups or to parties and just add random people in. These aren't those kind of games. These are games specifically designed for like you and a small group of your friends to play.
You get to find out. It took us such a long time to hook up with Jeffrey and Abby to get this Pandemic Legacy started. We were both looking for somebody else to play it with us for like weeks, months, maybe.
Yeah.
And then she just randomly mentioned it, and we're like, oh yes, we'll play.
Yeah.
Join us. Take us into your game.
Nice.
So do you think this is going to be like a fad, or maybe going to be sort of the future of gaming? Or where do you feel these legacy games are going?
You want to start with you?
I'll start with you.
All right.
Because you were ready. I could tell.
Yeah, so as a game designer, I've been considering this a lot lately because I definitely feel like the industry is shifting in this direction. With the explosion of legacy games, I know like Tom Vassell just a few months ago went on a rant like, don't worry, legacy games aren't blowing up. There's only like 4 or 5, but now there's like 10, and there's a whole bunch more in development. And the escape room games are also blowing up. There's tons now, and there's only more being added every day. I just backed another Kickstarter, Detective, which is another it's more campaign than legacy, but just these the one-play games are really kind of taking off, I feel. So I definitely feel like it's more than a fad and it's catching on, because I think there's more you can do with the system. When you think about it, we haven't had a real like new mechanic in board gaming in probably decades.
Since deck building.
Yeah. And so like this is probably the newest one, and that's why I think it's taking off so much, is because it's like, wow, this is a new experience. This is actually different. So I think for that reason it's going to take hold and probably blow up. I don't think like traditional games are in any kind of danger, because for all the cons we mentioned, like you can't just bring them and randomly play with people. I definitely don't think they're going to threaten board gaming in general, as far as traditional games go, but I do think they're going to continue to blow up and become more and more common. So.
Yeah, I'm always hesitant to make any predictions about what trends are going to be happening in the future, but I think there's an economic argument that says if people keep buying these games, they will keep being produced.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously they're never going to outnumber games that aren't consumable, because those are way more popular and have a much longer history.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, if people keep buying them, why would they stop making them? That'd be ridiculous.
Seventh Continent and Gloomhaven are 2 of the top 10 Kickstarter games, which is pretty amazing because neither of them are super mini focused. I mean, like, they both have minis in them, but Gloomhaven, the monsters are cardboard standees, right? So they're not like Zombicide, where it's like just about the miniatures, and that's why they made so much money. These are people interested in the mechanics in the campaign. So, yeah. Emma?
I don't know, but I would certainly like to play more escape the room games and legacy style games. So if it keeps on growing, that's a good thing for me.
Charles?
Well, I've seen a few different things, and I guess I'll talk about it later, but I do believe that there's going to be a legacy component that's going to go on. I'm not sure if it's going to be legacy like from the ground up or legacy modular, which I've seen recently with a couple games I'm going to talk about, specifically like the Centauri Saga. They have released a traditional board game, and then they are releasing a legacy expansion to it, where all you do is alter the legacy expansion. And I think, and then you still have your traditional board game in the box. And I think that feature is going to explode, especially, once people get out that or are able to discover if they can make these modules. And it might give some older games that have basically petered out on their expansion limit new life.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm ready for Agricola Legacy. That's gonna.
Charterstone, it's coming out. It's coming out. Yeah, that kind of segues into the last thing I want to talk about, which is the financial implications. For someone like me, I resell my board games. Like what you see on the shelves behind me, those are all the only board games I own, because I'm constantly selling games. And so a lot of these one-play games, you can't really do that. But companies are, I think, taking notice of that. I know Charterstone is coming out. It's a legacy game, but you'll be able to buy recharge packs, so you can actually resell it, and then someone can just buy the recharge pack for $20 or whatever. That's neat. So I like the companies are heading that direction. Seventh Continent is it's more of like a campaign style game. So it's technically not a legacy game. It's like you can play it, but then you can put the cards back in order and then resell it. So I do like that companies are designing them with ways that you can resell them. So right now the only ones that you really can are all the ones by Rob Davio, and the rest of them you can find some way to recharge them or resell them.
The problem with being an innovator is that usually there's a Tesla right behind your Edison. Actually, that's terrible analogy. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's a fair point that some of them aren't consumable, right? Escape the Room. We didn't actually buy that game. My friend Kure gave it to us because he had already played it, and it's easily replayable. Whereas the Exit ones we had to tear up, so we couldn't do those.
Yeah. $40 down the drain, but
yeah,
I had fun.
Yeah.
But it's still an experience, right? It's just like going to see a movie. After you do it, it's done, but you had good time doing it. So
I think we're kind of spoiled as board gamers because our hobby is honestly probably the cheapest hobby in existence. We buy even a $60 game. Well, you play it 6 times, and now it's $6 each.
$10 each.
Or $10 each. Yeah, I'm bad at math. This is a thing. I'm an English teacher.
But no, the other thing I think about is like the direction we could take it in. It's like a CCG, right? CCGs are what the thing that predated board games, and that was something where you had to spend money periodically. And this is the same thing. It's just a step back in that direction.
Yeah.
Correction. CCGs did not predate board games.
Oh, I think it means like as the hobby, yeah.
The modern board gaming hobby. I was like, you know,
You forget about all these
not
cosmic
like the
counters
ancient
and-
Egyptian games or whatever.
and ancient
Go.
games,
Chess
coming
and
back.
stuff, but you know what I mean.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I understood your point, but you know, Charles likes to snipe.
Millennial Smackdown. Man.
No, man, nothing that was before I was born matters.
All right, well, let's do our top 3 one-play games. And before I do want to mention, I don't think any of us here have played Gloomhaven, Seventh Continent, Charterstone.
I played Seventh Continent.
Never mind. He can maybe talk about that, but
Sure.
you know, so these are games that'll probably be in our top 3, maybe
And
in a year, or maybe not.
Honestly, that was my number 3. It's the games to come, because you can just see all these games that are getting their second printing, or some potential that are coming out. Like, they're making Ultimate Werewolf Legacy with Allspark and Davio, who are making that's coming out next year.
Oh, that'd be cool.
That's in the Centauri Saga Abandoned, which is the Legacy expansion, comes out next year. There's a game out now called Jackal Archipelago, which is like a legacy game for kids. That's also modular. And then, you know, what you mentioned, Gloomhaven, actual wide water distribution printing.
There was another one for kids, wasn't it called like Fabled Fruit or something?
Yeah, Fable Fruit, but I don't think it's actually legacy. It just sort of evolves over time. You
It's
can always reset
campaign.
it also. Yeah.
Okay, like Harry Potter, which I really like the Harry Potter, what they did with deck building, and how like each campaign or each part of the campaign was like a different book and brought in characters from a different book in the series. That was really cool.
Yeah.
But it didn't quite make my top 3, so let's get into the top 3. I'll start with Risk Legacy. So I'm probably the only one at this table that enjoys Risk, and the only one at this table that enjoys Risk Legacy. But I really loved it. I think it's an interesting twist on the Risk format, and I'd love for another Dudes on a Map game to come out that is Legacy, because what's really cool is, like, you know, there was this huge battle in this place, and now there's, like, you know, scars in the battlefield that are permanent, and it changes the way the world works. That's just a really neat concept, and I think you can only kind of do that in a Dudes on a Map game. I mean, Pandemic Legacy does that, but that's co-op. So I'd like a competitive game that has, like, a world map that permanent changes get made based on, like, the battles that happen. I think that was really cool what Risk Legacy did. It also, well, that's spoilers. I can't talk about the things that you unlock in the game, but you unlock some really cool, really game-changing things. And in fact, of all the Legacy games I've played so far, that one probably changed over the course of the campaign more. It does it even more than Pandemic Legacy. Like, some crazy stuff happens in that campaign, so it's really cool.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting take, because almost all the one-play games are cooperative. They're not competitive. So for the first one to be a competitive game is a really novel thing that hasn't been really repeated in that way.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, Seafall, but...
Yeah, but apparently the game's not very good. So.
It actually I think it would have been a lot better as a co-op game. Like, I think if they had just thrown out the competitive nature of it, and it had been like a sea exploration game of exploring and discovering things and building up cities, it'd have been a much better game. But we'll talk more about that in a second. Your third.
My number 3 is Escape the Room: Secret of Dr. Gravelly's Retreat, which is the Escape the Room game we've played. And it's really good because it's just very thematically consistent. I mean, you're stuck in this health retreat, and there's a bunch of crazy stuff going on, and really cool because there's like physical puzzles in it that you actually sort of manipulate with your hands. It's not just stuff on paper. So, I mean, that was a really interesting game. Yeah, I like that one a lot.
There you go.
He stole what I was going to say about Escape the Room with the physical puzzles, because that was my comment. The physical puzzles in the Escape the Room game were, extremely nice. And I liked that it was always obvious in that game what your goal was, which is maybe not the case with some of these other Escape the Room games.
Yeah. Charles? Your number 3.
So, well, like I said, my number 3 is the game.
Potential games. Right. All right, number 2. My number 2 controversial decision. I actually put Seafall here, but it's the first 10 games of Seafall. I was having a really great time. It's one of those games that unlocks new mechanics as you go on, and at some almost every box we unlocked opened a worse mechanic that made the game worse. and it just got like progressively worse. And then we hit the second to last box. We didn't get to the last box. Like the second to last box does something to the game that I think ruined it in a lot of ways, and it just stopped becoming interesting. It was a novelty, but as Charles mentioned, I feel like those last couple boxes he probably didn't playtest enough. He probably had a bunch of people playtesting Seafall, but how many groups actually got to the end and kind of fully explored the end of the campaign before he sent it to the publishers? I don't know. So
how many more games am I going to have to play before we end this? Just
exactly.
Theoretically, how many more games are we going to have to play?
But yeah, it started off with such promise. Some people have said they don't like the mechanics, or they think the mechanics are boring. I thought the mechanics in the beginning of the game were solid. I just felt like the more they added to it, the more it took away from the experience. And as I already mentioned, I think it would have worked a lot better as a co-op game if there was some kind of NPC forces, or just the exploring might have been difficult, which it is, even though it's competitive. If you were just you and your friends against the world and exploring this new world, it would have been more like a Seventh Continent experience with some Ameritrash die rolls in it. So I think that would have been a better game.
Okay, that's a great idea. Spirit Island legacy game.
Oh God, I would play the hell out of that.
Right.
Let's get back to Seafall.
Go ahead.
Even in the first 10 games, there were mechanics that were problematic. I will say that.
There are some.
Your ability to just literally snipe behind someone when they're exploring and then take what they've been trying to uncover for a long time is just terrible. And you could just...
It's like I get there first and score 1 point. You come behind me and score 4 off of my hard work.
Just happened constantly and all the time. The rating seemed like you only do it maybe once or twice a game because you were doing the heavy rating strategy. Yeah. And then, things that you got off, like if, it really sucked if you had a strategy that wasn't focused on what they intended you to focus on at some point. If you're, I don't want to get into it, but if you're not doing strategy C by the time it gets to round 10 or 11, you are really effed in the A, or messed up. Let me put that in.
Yeah, I think that speaks
Sorry about that. My fault. My apologies.
Edit note. I think that speaks to one of the problems with legacy games, which I don't know if we had mentioned this before, but the idea that as you're playing the game, you're sort of learning to understand it, and if you're only playing it once, you might not understand it when you start. And if you understand it by the middle, you've already made some mistakes. I think that was something that we saw in our first playthrough of the Exit game, where we didn't know exactly what the puzzles meant. So by the time we got to the third one, we were a lot more familiar with what the system meant.
Yeah. And the PvP in Seafall is also, it's like devastating. Like you sink someone and their whole game is ruined. Like they might as well, because they got to spend a couple turns repairing and then moving back out of their home port. It's just...
And then the game is going to be over because someone's going to score whatever the point value is for that round.
So the same problem as Merchants and Marauders.
We made it to the second round one time, the second winter, one time in Seafall, and the game is designed for you to make it to that second winter, most of the time, because otherwise you don't get a lot of the benefits from all the stuff you've been building, and anyway, enough about Seafall. Your number 2?
My number 2 is Time Stories: A Prophecy of Dragons. So this is the third or fourth in the Time Stories series, the fourth, I believe.
Fourth, I believe.
It's fantasy themed. And what made this game particularly good was a very hilarious experience we had playing it, where there was a part in the game...
Can't tell spoilers.
I'll do it in a non-spoiler way. There was a part in the game where we had to get
spoiling it. No.
Get through some water.
That's a spoiler. That's a spoiler.
Definitely a spoiler.
Okay. Well, there's a part of the game that was a very unlikely situation happens, and it seemed like we weren't going to make it, but at the last moment we made it, and it was very exciting. That's the non-spoiler way I can say it. Okay, people are happy.
I'm intrigued. I want to play this game now.
Yeah. For me, it's hard to choose between the different Time Stories expansions, but just Time Stories as a whole, I think, like Charles was saying, has the strongest memories for me as far as good times with friends and interesting twists and turns and really exciting moments.
Yeah, but that game has a problem. Like, I think Joel Eddy talked about it in his review, where they got to a point. They were at the end, towards the end of the campaign. They got into combat and lost the combat, and they were gonna have to restart. And he said, "No, we're not doing this. We're not going back through this scenario again just because we lost a die roll. So they just cheated basically and said like, no, we defeated this monster, and then continue the campaign, which is something I would probably do because that was, I've only played one campaign of Time Stories, but that was definitely my least favorite thing. Is like, we got towards the end of the campaign and then we found some random monster in a tunnel or something and it killed us, and then we had to restart the entire thing and start from scratch. I was like,
and to be fair, I do think that's the weakest part of the game, the combat mechanism. I think the storytelling and the art and the combination package is the best thing of it.
Yeah.
And actually, my number 2 is Tom Stories, the Marcy case, because I feel as it's the combat-oriented Tom Stories, and there's enough items available for you to actually fight against the game. It's much more, yes, you are still making die rolls, but there's weapons everywhere, and different types of weapons for different characters, and I feel like that game, you're supposed to be a person who can go and attack. You're basically like cops, so to speak, or people in the city. You have guns. You have people who can like snipe over extra spaces to help out their friends and stuff and not have to be in the same area. So I just was like, this is just really a good combat game. And honestly, the very first 2 Tom Stories are still, to me, the best 2. For that reason. One was much more cerebral, horror, and macabre, and sort of like a psychological thriller, and the other one's sort of like, Lethal Weapon, so to speak, where you actually are going out and blowing out stuff.
I've only played the one campaign Time Stories, but what I do like about it is how like each one is very different thematically. I think that's really cool. Maybe one day I'll give it another try, but anyway, our number 1s. So my number 1 is Pandemic Legacy.
That's my number 1.
Yeah.
That's what we were gonna say too, based purely on how excited we are.
It's crazy for me because unlike the other people at this table, I actually hate Pandemic. Like, I will never play regular Pandemic again. It's just, to me, the worst co-op game because it has all the problems of co-op games. It has alpha player. It's super abstract. It's totally based on like the card draws. Like, your strategy only goes so far. If the deck comes out wrong for you, you can't do anything. And probably most of your losses in Pandemic are just the cards came out in the wrong order, and so. Pandemic Legacy has all these same flaws, but what overcomes all of those flaws for me is that the game is so interesting, the campaign is so interesting, the way the world changes based on the things that happen, the way your character changes because of the things you discover, like, it's just really a neat system, and, I don't even like co-op games for the most part, but we were like playing a movie, right? We were like deciding the fate of the world in a board game. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't played that much of it, Emma and I. But I'm very excited for what is to come. There's a lot of cool ideas in it, like adding stickers to the rulebook when you get new rules. I think that's really cool. Upgrading characters, upgrading the board. It's the only terrifying thing is that cities can be destroyed. So that's kind of sad because it's a lot of death.
If you spec your character wrong, get ready to die. Hard.
Yeah.
That's my one warning to you as you move forward.
Yeah.
But it should be fun. If a few million people die in the meantime, it's still a game. It's fun.
Yeah. My one criticism of the game is that it was probably too easy, and they probably should have, like, at the beginning of the game, you probably should have been able to set your difficulty, and like people who are good board gamers should probably like select hard because the game is not hard. Like, we lost 4 times, Charles lost once. Right.
One time.
Pretty good.
So, yeah, the game is probably too easy because they probably try to hit, like, the average board game co-op player skill level, and which is what they should have done. But I think, in addition to that, they probably should have said, well, if you're really good at Pandemic, you should probably do this differently and make it a little harder.
I think they were going for the whole score thing to see how you do against the baseline score. And,
to me, it would have been more interesting if, like, the end of the campaign, either the world is destroyed or not, instead of like boiling it down to the score. Because, like, as you mentioned, you felt like the scoring was unfair. I think like some of the things.
Don't spoil the scoring.
Yeah, if you do really well,
Yeah.
there's some of the stuff you just can't really score high on.
You don't know in advance what you're being scored on.
But that's why I go in the win. I look at that game as more like a win-loss record, right?
Yeah.
So, your win-loss means much more to me than your actual point value score does. So I'm very proud of the 12-1 we were able to get.
But conversely, that also means you got less money value out of the game because you got to put fewer plays out of it. So it's almost, which is a weird thing because it's like the worse you are at Pandemic Legacy, the more value you actually get out of the game because the game can be played 24 times. Charles only played it 13 times. I only played it, I'm bad at math, 17 times.
On the other hand, if you count losses as negative gameplay, then it's better to win.
You're still having fun.
Is
you don't realize you're losing until you lose, right? Yeah. So anyway, that's our top 3. The last thing we're gonna do today is just talk about some games we played, and I put down all the exit games, so we can talk about each one of those because we recently played through all of them.
Yeah.
So we'll start with the Secret Lab, which was the first one that we played. We kind of already mentioned. I liked the puzzles, but as they mentioned earlier, the theme for this one is kind of boring, right? It's very generic. Y'all feel the same?
Like you're in a science experiment, mix some chemicals together. I mean, I think that's kind of a problem for all the exit games, is that the puzzles that you do don't necessarily make sense in the context of the game.
Yeah.
Like, it's just some random puzzle that happens to be in this room for some reason.
That's true. Yeah, I hope for stronger thematic connections in the future exit games. So this one was probably my least favorite, barring one thing that we'll talk about now. So the next one we played was Exit Pharaoh's Tomb, which was thematically, I think, the most interesting, and most of the puzzles were really solid. But then there's one puzzle in that game, which we won't spoil, but it was unfair, I feel. Like, the game gave you no indication that you could do the thing that it expected you to do.
Yeah.
And I've heard them complain for hours about
this.
Yes.
The saddest thing
it was really frustrating.
The saddest thing is it feels like there would have been such an easy fix, just a small change in wording that would have, opened our minds to the possibilities, and then everything would have been okay.
The Abandoned Cabin had a similar puzzle, but it gave you hints that you could do this.
Yeah.
So we knew we could do it, and we were able to solve it very easily. We would have also solved it easily in Pharaoh's Tomb had we known that we had the ability to do this. Like, we literally had no idea. So that one frustrating experience aside, I did enjoy that one overall. But my favorite was probably overall the Abandoned Cabin, just because I thought the puzzles were interesting, although it was probably the easiest one, or maybe we're just getting better because we actually finished it in 44 minutes.
Yeah.
But
this is the one I participated in, by the way.
Yeah, what were your thoughts on the exit experience?
It reminded me of the generally going to an escape room. So I think if you want to save money on going to an escape room and just have that same experience in your house, I mean, it's good. And I think, for, what are they, $20, $30, $40 board games? Whatever the exit.
The exit is like $10 each.
Okay, so they're very cheap experience alternative. And I found myself doing a lot of things that do in an escape room, so it's very accurate to that. But unfortunately, it's not really as interactive as I would like. You are basically, well, it is interactive in the way you're always talking to each other, but you are working on these puzzles individually in order to be most efficient. And you pretty much have to break down into either solo or two-person groups in order to get things done efficiently. And the one good part is, since you're all at the same table, unlike a general escape room, you don't really need a leading player to just sort of bring all the information together.
Yeah. Although as a counterpoint to that, I think if there is someone who's very good at puzzles, like I think Emma's the person in our group who is the best at puzzles, that person can power through a lot of those, and without them, the whole process grounds to a halt.
Yeah, some of the puzzles they were just solving in like 5 seconds. I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah, that's good enough for me. I don't even know what you did over there, but
I remember I was working on a puzzle, just like, okay, this puzzle's done, and you're like, okay, good.
Next.
Next.
Cool. But overall, I think it's a good system, and I look forward to playing more of them. All right, what other? Oh, y'all just played Lisboa. Talk about that. Never mind. Our producer Ian, who is in the backyard or in the living room, played Lisboa, but he said it's very good. So one of us will talk about it next time. Any other new games y'all played?
Indeed. I have a couple. I guess I should talk about Seventh Continent since I didn't get a chance to do that.
Oh yeah, please.
All right, so someone had brought it to Saturday Games because I guess they wanted to see if they wanted to back the expansion for the Kickstarter for the expansion. It's a really cool system. So basically the way it works is like there's so many cards. There's like, I don't know, 500 to 1,000 cards in that game. And whenever you have like these little dudes on a map, and whenever you explore a new area, you draw a specific card, and then based on that you'll find whatever's there. Mm-hmm. So it's actually a pretty cool idea, and the mechanism works. There's one problem with the game being a 4-player game, but it's really just a solo game with 4 pieces in it. Mm-hmm. So like there's not really a reason to split up the party or to not go alone. It's just sort of you have these pieces in different parts of the map, and for whatever reason you have 4 players doing it. I guess they just wanted to extend it to 4. The problem with the game is it's boring. We explore this long... There's actually 2 problems, but the big one is that it's boring. We explore this big, long island, and what do we find? How can I say without spoiling it?
Wood. You found wood.
There were some resources. There were some crabs, which we ate. And there was a boat. That was a fun island I found. So that's one problem.
Well, you find more than one island, right?
Yeah, we did not play the whole game. Well, I mean, we only played probably 3 hours of it, which was just exploring Lava Island. The other problem with the game is they sort of built a time pressure thing into it. So like the way it works is there's this deck of cards, and as you take actions, you're depleting cards from the deck and putting them in the discard pile. Mm-hmm. And when you draw the curse card from that deck, it essentially halves your game, and then once you draw a second time, the game is over. The problem is it's really, really easy to add cards from the discard pile back into the deck. So the time limit is not actually there, because you can just take those cards from the discard pile, put them back in the deck. So you can really take as long as you want. There's no pressure in the game at all, which was kind of disappointing. So it was a good system. Maybe if you played more of it, you'd find more interesting things on the island, but as we found it, a lot of rocks.
There's also expansions that add things to it that they may or may not have been playing with.
And algae. There was algae too. That was fun.
So is it more like, you go to a point, you flip something over, it says you found it, and then that's it? Or
yeah, I mean, there's some more stuff like it. There's like I'm here now, I can explore this area. Not really. There's like, so the whole mechanism of this game is whatever action you're doing, you're drawing cards from the deck and you're looking for successes, essentially. Okay. So if I'm hunting or if I'm fighting something, I'm going to draw some number of cards from the deck and I can draw for successes. And I guess the choice in the game is like, how many cards do you draw? So, how am I going to push my luck?
Your luck system.
But if I can just easily hunt and then eat stuff and then put more cards in the discard pile, I can just draw as many as I want. Who cares? So I gotta say, pretty disappointing. Sorry, back in Kickstarter.
You and Emma, do you play anything?
No, the only new stuff I've played are the exit games that we've been playing here. So.
Okay.
Charles?
I actually played Scythe after.
Oh yes, I heard about this
many times. The first time I played Scythe, I just thought.
Oh, you played it twice?
I did, because I disliked it so much the first time. I said, maybe there's a chance that my initial impression was wrong. The second time I played, I both won and still disliked it. So,
what are the things you have with it?
This is King of the Hill masquerading as a Euro game, masquerading as a war game. So, what we want to be is a big part of the Scythe issue to me. And I'm just like, do people like this game just for itself? Or is it because they put so much money into it and have so many different components and bells and whistles that they just want to like it? I mean,
I think it's mechanically solid, but
it's solid. Yeah, there's nothing really wrong with it. There's nothing really great about it.
Yeah.
It has a tremendous first player advantage, in my opinion. I ended the game. I was first player. I won the first game I played. The first player also won because the game ends immediately. It doesn't have equal number of turns. I know that's a Stegmeyer special. Not getting sponsored by Jamie anytime soon. But
I feel like I'm okay with that.
But, I did like all the bits. I like how it spreads out. Parts of it are good and then parts of them are just sort of...
It's not a race game per se, but pretty much every time we've played, whoever ends the game also wins the game.
Right. And
the unequal number of turns is also a problem in that.
And then, everyone rushing for the factory in the center. and I just had like a power that could teleport me to the center. Great. Now I got a factory card. I had to do much less movement than anyone else. I got this card, which is its own production building, and it drafts off of nothing. So it's just a pure benefit to me, and I got it first. And now people have to expend the resources and time just to get me out. So
yeah,
it's
I
just,
think
That's problems.
I played Scythe also twice actually in a row, and I definitely get some balance issues as Stonemaier games tend to. The player powers are not balanced among each other. The second time I played, I also won, and it was the guy who could take the same action twice, which is just a super
that's
secret
who I
ability.
wanted. That's who I wanted.
That guy's incredibly good.
Hey.
And just like the upgrade track is also not balanced. Like once I lost the first game because I was with experienced players, but I was like, you should just always do the bottom track because that's just the way better one compared to the other ones. So I don't know. I feel like so many of those games are just like, how do you play this with people when they all keep doing the same thing over and over again? Because that's just the best thing to do.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I like Scythe, but I definitely think it has a lot of the problems that they mentioned. And for me, it just doesn't have the replayability factor. Like, I played it a few times and then I sold it because I didn't feel like I was discovering new and interesting things every time I played. It felt kind of like the same experience every time.
I'm sure it'll be a big expansion with a full Kickstarter set that you can back sometime next year.
Back in and sell it. I would say.
Now, if they add a legacy component,
There you go.
you might get my money again. All right, my next game is Cottage Garden, which is basically multiplayer patchwork, which is it's another Uwe Rosenberg game where it's one of his Tetris games, like Feast for Odin and Patchwork, where you're getting pieces and you're playing Tetris with them as efficiently as possible, which sounds super boring, but and I didn't buy the game. I buy most of his games, but I didn't buy this one because I thought it sounded super boring, and I already had Patchwork, and I do enjoy Patchwork, but I felt like multiplayer Patchwork would just mean like more downtime. Surprisingly, though, I liked the game. So I don't even know. I can't explain why I liked it, but maybe it was faster than I thought it would be. It was more interesting than I thought it would be. I don't know. It was a pretty good game.
It has good setup. It has good interaction between all four of the players in terms of what they're doing. I don't own Patchwork, and because it was just 2-player, but I did purchase the game. I played with Trey, and it's like, hey, these games are good. They're actually, it's almost like an intro game. No. You teach it to people. Game, yeah. It's a good gateway game, and from there on, it has really nice components. I mean, cats, flower pots, little wheelbarrow going around, and Tetris pieces. What more
cats are like a currency in that game. Interesting.
That's kind of disturbing, but that sounds pretty fun.
All right, you got Downforce?
Downforce. It's the Restorations game publication. It's a reimplementation of a couple different games, one of which is Daytona 500, and it's also close to the game Top Race. Okay. So the game is basically you bid for race cars, and then you play cards from your hand that move a bunch of different cars, and then you're trying to finish. There's also some interesting things that make it different from those other games. One is the way you bid. So the way you bid is kind of interesting. It's simultaneously blind bidding. So a card comes out, and then you play one of your cards from your hand, and whoever plays the highest of that color gets to win that car. Okay. So I play my car with the 5 black on it. If that's the highest black card that was played, I get to win that car.
Does everyone start with the same currency, or is it just randomly?
It's just the randomly deck of cards, and all the cards have some number of cars moving some number of spaces. But whatever amount you win with is how many points you lose at the end of the game. So if you bid too high, then you're going to lose a bunch of points, but then you might get the car. If you bid too low, you're not going to get the car. The other part of the game, which is interesting, is that like at 3 different points in the lap, you get to bet on who you think is going to win. So that's kind of cool. As these cars move, you're like, oh, I think that guy's ahead, I think he's going to win. Or, oh, I see this person's going to catch up, so I'm going to bet on them. So it's actually a pretty clever re-implementation. And it plays 6 players, which is pretty rare for that kind of game. And it's super fast, too.
So you liked it?
Oh, yeah, I thought it was really good.
Why don't you segue into Pit Stop, since it's thematically similar?
Pit Stop! You know what I like about Downforce and Pit Stop is you can say them and they sound cool. Pit Stop, Downforce. Right. Pit Stop is a Jeff Engelstein game, and it was actually the first one of his games that I've actually liked, so that's a plus.
What? You liked it?
I liked it.
Oh, wow.
It's a team game. It's a real-time card playing game. Basically, you have like a car with 4 tires and an engine number, like 27. And you draw cards from the deck, which are either black or white cards, and they range from 1 to 10. And you're trying to play them in different combinations to build your tires. Like the cards have to be adjacent on the tires, and then to make the total inside the car. So the card number is 27. You add more. You add the cards together until you get to 27, and then based on that, you have to build your car really fast. And then if you finish before the people, you get to roll the die. And if you get a 6, you get a little advance to your car on the score tracker. And then based on how you built your car, the car moves around. Or if you made mistakes and you had to discard cards, then everyone else's car moves. So it's kind of really thematically interesting because this is kind of like you are a pit stop. You're trying to play these cards really fast on this car before everyone else, and then later you get special powers. It was a surprisingly fun game. I don't know what the replay value would be like, but I enjoyed it.
It's a speed-based game now.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Speed-based. You play those cards as fast as possible.
Interesting.
Hello.
Norm! Sorry
All
about
right.
that. We'll have to cut this part out.
It's fine. Charles, did you have any other games that you tried?
Thanks to these guys, I played Quicks.
Oh, Quicks.
Yes.
How was that?
I loved it. I went and bought the deluxe version, which has a new variant on it.
Did you bring it today?
I did bring it today.
Hell yeah.
I just think it's a really good strategic sort of push your luck dice game. It's easy to teach, especially for my game group. I was able to get 4 people who had never even seen the game before, explain it to them while I was between turns of Scythe. And then they only had to ask me one more question between my next round of turns of Scythe. So it goes very well. What's the best way to say it? You roll 6 die, 2 of them are white, 4 of them are different colors, and you just sort of try to get rows of numbers either from 12 down to 2 or from 2 up to 12. And doesn't sound like much, but it is a blast along the way. And the deluxe version, which is a Target exclusive, I need to start talking about Target exclusives. They're getting pretty good now. Just sort of adds dry erase markers, 8 players, and it's just nice.
Cool. Probably get to try it out. My last game is Chinatown, which is actually not the first time I played it. I've actually played it many, many years ago. But this is an open trading game of which there are hardly any in this genre, and Chinatown is a classic and probably the best.
Very pure.
The only, right? At this point.
There's basically no open trading games besides like Monopoly when people can they trade, but Monopoly's a terrible game. But Chinatown, basically, I think the drawback is it only plays 5 players. I think if it went to 6, it'd probably be better. Mm-hmm. But basically, in that game, you get dealt property and you get dealt shops, and then you want to trade with other players to get the same kinds of shops, because when you have the same kind of shops, you make more money, and money is points in that game. So you're trying to trade with people to get the kinds of shops you want to build, and you're also trading property because you need to cluster your property together to build larger shops. So you're kind of basically trading property and money and different shops, and you can trade any of it, So it's really neat because it has hardly any rules on the trading. You can just do whatever. The problem in that game is that the best strategy is to get dealt good cards, because if you get dealt cards that are clustered in the same area, then you don't have to trade, and so you're just given a kind of a huge advantage.
Yeah, but I would say that's not that common. You were probably the person who got dealt the best cards in the game we played, and Jeremy was the person who won, because really the best strategy in that game is to be really, really tough with everyone, and yet somehow have them still want to trade with you, which is how Jeremy did it.
That's how Jeremy lives his life.
I guess so. Like, if you're a good negotiation, you can clean up in that game.
Okay.
And he was just like, I'm going to make only deals that are advantageous for me, and people kept trading with him, so yeah, that game is very pure.
Never trust the Catman people.
He got dealt a lot of good properties too. Not necessarily properties that he was already in, but he got dealt other people's properties, so we had to go to him and get those properties from him.
Yeah, that helps too.
So in other words, get dealt good cards and you have a good chance of winning.
Yeah, there's some luck in the game, but I think the negotiation is the more important part.
Yeah. You had one more?
Yeah, one more for me, which is That's a Question. Only exclamation games here. That's a Question, which is the Vlad Chevalo party game. I guess his follow-up to Codenames. And the game is essentially squirrel-themed Would You Rather, the game. So you have a hand of cards, and the cards are all in 3 parts, and all the parts provide answers for one of the 3 questions. Either, what would you miss more if it ceased to exist? or which of these would you choose, or which do you consider worse? Someone who, provide an example of that. So each turn you're going to choose someone, you're going to take their acorn or hazelnut. For some reason the tokens are a double side, because I guess in some country they think squirrels eat hazelnuts instead of acorns.
Squirrels eat what squirrels have to eat that's in nut form. So it could be.
Well, it's very important in the game that they provided both options for players.
Okay.
So you take their hazelnut or acorn, and you put your 2 cards down, and then everyone essentially bets on what they think that person's gonna pick. So they're like, "Oh, will he miss unicorns or parks more? I think he's gonna miss unicorns more, so I'll pick that one." And then you score based on that. It's a pretty silly game. It's one of those games where you sort of have to know the other players, and I suffered a bit for that because I didn't know the people were playing with that well, but it's okay. If you like Would You Rather, it's worth a shot.
All right. Very cool. Charles, do you have any more?
I'll save it for next time. But my question, viewers, is why are people playing Tichu like it's a new game again?
Because Tichu is one of the best games ever made.
Oh man, yeah, we've had a Tichu renaissance in our group, and it's annoying because it's like people are like, "Oh, this is the best game ever." We were like,
"Yeah,
man, we played the heck out of that game 10 years ago. We're over it."
No, you can never be over Tichu.
Oh, I'm over it.
I played the heck out of Tichu, and I still want to play more.
So over Tichu.
Look, one of these days when y'all have me back, if you ever have me back after this.
Never.
I'm going to tell you.
You're part of the Tichu cult.
I'm going to tell you about the Tao of Tichu. There's a whole life philosophy that is based on Tichu, which I made up. And it has songs.
We'll do a podcast about Tichu and why it's not that great of a game and why people need to stop playing it and start playing other games.
You can guess me on that, and I'll give a counterpoint.
I like Tichu.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like Tichu too. 10 years ago, when I played it 1,000 times, I got sick of it.
But Tichu's had a couple renaissances.
Hey, we have 100 subscribers, okay? If y'all alienate the Tichu crowd, that's going to take off at least 30.
No, but we have some pro voices here.
All right.
So, thanks Ben and Emma for joining us on this episode. I hope you've enjoyed listening. Please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. We're on YouTube. The channel is Eternally Bored. That's BOARD, as in board games. And on Twitter, @EternallyBored. There's no underscore, just one word. Our website is www.eternallybored.com. And until next time, we're eternally bored, so you don't have to be.
Bye, everyone.